In Nigeria, power has always been easy to recognize. It wears uniforms, it controls oil wells, it occupies government houses. For decades, political power in Nigeria has followed a familiar geography, moving between regions, guarded by institutions, titles, and state authorities. Yet, beneath this visible structure of power lies another Nigeria, quieter, less ceremonial, but deeply influential. It is found in markets, workshops, warehouses, auto parks, spare parts shops, trading routes, and manufacturing clusters. And at the center of this other Nigeria is a paradox that refuses to disappear: the Igbo people, a group that has not produced a Nigerian president since 1966, that rarely controls the military, oil institutions, or national security architecture. They continue to dominate large portions of Nigeria's economy, trade networks, and urban commercial life. They are present in almost every Nigerian city. They control key sectors of informal and formal commerce. They build wealth without relying on federal allocation. This documentary asks a simple but uncomfortable question: how does a people with limited political power continue to wield such enormous economic and social influence in Nigeria? This is not a story of superiority. It is not a political argument. It is a sociological and economic investigation into how power can exist and even thrive outside the corridors of government. To understand the Igbo story, we must first clarify what dominance means in this context. This documentary does not define dominance as control of the presidency, control of the military, ownership of oil blocks, political appointments, or party structures. Instead, dominance here refers to market penetration, trade coordination, control of supply chains, manufacturing clusters, urban commercial presence, capital circulation, community-driven development. In other words, this is a story about economic leverage, not political authority. In Nigeria, political power distributes budgets, but economic power determines who actually survives, expands, and reproduces wealth. And this is where the Igbo presence becomes impossible to ignore. Before 1966, the Igbo story looked very different. At independence, Igbos were disproportionately represented in civil service, education, medicine, engineering, journalism, public administration. They believed, like many educated elites, that political participation was the ultimate path to security and influence. Then came the military coups. Then came the Nigerian Civil War. The Nigerian Civil War did not merely defeat Biafra militarily. It destroyed Igbo confidence in the Nigerian state as a reliable protector of their future. After the war, properties were abandoned, bank accounts were wiped, businesses were destroyed, savings were reduced to a flat £20 policy. For many Igbo families, the lesson was brutal but clear. Political power could be lost overnight. Economic independence could not. From this point onward, a quiet transformation began. The Nigerian Civil War was a defining trauma for the Igbos. It represented loss of life, loss of property, loss of saving, loss of political trust. The abandoned property policy wiped out investments. The 20-pound policy erased personal wealth overnight. More damaging than material loss was the message sent. The state could not be relied upon. From that moment, a generational lesson took hold. Political power was unstable. Economic independence was survival. This was not bitterness, it was recalibration. After the war, Igbos did not retreat into isolation. They dispersed. Across Nigeria, Igbo traders, artisans, technicians, and entrepreneurs began rebuilding, not through politics, but through markets. They stopped waiting for government rehabilitation. They stopped trusting federal protection. Instead, they invested in skills, trade, networks, capital circulation, self-reliance. This was not accidental. It was cultural adaptation. When political power became dangerous, Igbos redesigned survival around economic systems that did not depend on the states. After the war, Igbo society did something remarkable. Instead of withdrawing from Nigeria, it dispersed into it. Across cities and towns, Igbo families rebuilt quietly, not by lobbying government, but by embedding themselves into economic life. This was not random entrepreneurship, it was a structured adaptation. Children were trained early in trade. Risk was normalized. Failure was treated as temporary. Where others sought safety in government, employment, Igbos sought resilience in self-owned enterprise. At the heart of Igbo dominance lies a worldview among the Igbo. Wealth is respected, enterprise is celebrated, dependency is discouraged, risk is normalized. A young man is not encouraged to wait for government jobs, he is encouraged to learn a trade. A family pride is not tied to titles, it is tied to how many people they have helped stand on their feet. This philosophy produced one of Africa's most effective informal economic institutions. At the core of Igbo dominance lies a shared philosophy. Wealth is dignity. Productivity is honor. Dependency is shameful. Among the Igbos, a young man without skill is considered unfinished. Wealth is celebrated openly. Success carries obligation. This worldview does not glorify comfort. It glorifies effort. It is this mindset that produced one of the most efficient informal economic systems in the world. The Igbo apprenticeship system, often called Igbo Boy, operates without government regulation, banks, or international aids. A young apprenticeship work under a master trader for several years, learning business ethics, supply chains, customer relations, risk management, capital discipline. At the end of the training, the master settles the apprentice with capitals, goods, shop space, mentorship. The apprentice becomes a competitor, not a threat. This system does three powerful things. It redistributes wealth, it reproduces entrepreneurs, it expands markets without conflict. Few societies in the world institutionalize competition this way. The Igbo apprenticeship system is not charity. It is a structured capitalism with social roots. A boy leaves home to serve a master. He learns discipline, trade secrets, supplier networks, and customer trust. Years later, he is settled not with pity, but with capital. This system multiplies businesses, expands markets, reduces unemployment, builds loyalty. It works because it aligns individual ambition with communal growth. Few societies replicate competition this way. From Lagos to Kano, from Port Harcourt to Abuja, Igbo traders dominate critical commercial arteries. In Lagos, Alaba International Market controls electronic distribution across West Africa. Computer Village powers Nigeria's digital hardware ecosystem. In the north, Igbo traders dominate spare parts, pharmaceuticals, and electronics. Even in hostile environment, networks adapt and survive. In Abuja, building materials, SME supply chains, and real estate investments are all controlled by the Igbos. The strength lies not in numbers alone, but in coordination. Across Nigeria, Igbo trade networks form invisible highways. From Onitsha to Lagos, from Aba to Kano, from Nnewi to Port Harcourt. Goods move quickly. Information moves faster. Capital circulates internally. Markets like Alaba, Computer Village, Ariara, Onitsha main markets are not chaotic accidents. They are organized ecosystems. Nnewi represents something rare in Africa. Indigenous manufacturing without state backing. Family-owned factories produce auto parts, machinery, industrial components. Knowledge is shared informally. Capital is reinvested locally. Success is replicated, not monopolized. This is capitalism with communal roots. Nnewi challenges African industrial stereotypes. Without state subsidies, families built factories. Without protection, industry survived. Knowledge spreads horizontally. Success is copied, not hoarded. This creates industrial density, rare in Africa. Igbo migration did not weaken home communities, it strengthened it. Across Europe, North America, Asia, and Africa, town unions fund development. Diaspora remittances build hospitals, schools, roads. Development occurs without waiting for Abuja. Perhaps the most important factor is this: Igbos do not structure their lives around government. They expect little, they demand little, they build anyways. This makes them resilient during political instability, flexible during economic downturns, less exposed to policy failures. Igbos do not organize life around federal power. They expect instability. They plan for self-sufficiency. This makes them flexible, mobile, shock-resistant. It is power built on independence. This success comes at a price. Without political power, communities remain vulnerable. Infrastructures lag. Security protection is weak. Scapegoating occurs during crisis. Economic dominance does not equal safety. The Igbo case proves a larger truth. Power is not singular. It exists in forms. Political power controls laws. Economic power controls outcomes. The Igbo build systems that survive whoever is in office. The Igbo case reveals a deeper truth. Power is not singular. Political power commands. Economic power sustains. The Igbos mastered the second when the first became dangerous. The Igbo story is not rebellion. It is adaptation. It shows that influence can exist without permission. In Nigeria, power does not always sit in government houses. Sometimes it sits quietly in markets, workshops, in communities, rebuilding itself again and again. The Igbo story is not about rebellion. It is about adaptation. It shows that in Nigeria, you can lose election and still win life. You can be excluded and still expand. You can be marginalized and still matter. Because sometimes, power does not sit in Aso Rock. Sometimes, it sits quietly in markets, workshops, and communities, multiplying itself generation after generation. The Igbo story is not a story of domination. It is a story of adaptation. It shows that when access to political power becomes uncertain, people can redesign the meaning of power itself. They can build systems that do not wait for permission. They can create influence that survives government, policies, and even exclusion. Across Nigeria, markets will open tomorrow, regardless of who sits in office. Goods will move, trades will be learned, wealth will circulate quietly, steadily, and persistently. This is the Igbo method. Not loud, not ceremonial, but deeply effective. Yet, this story also raises a larger question, not just about the Igbo, but about Nigeria itself. What happens when an entire region learns to thrive without the state? What kind of nation emerges when economic life grows faster than political inclusion? And what lesson can be learned from communities that build resilience instead of waiting for rescue? These are conversations worth having. If you found this documentary valuable, take a moment to support this work by subscribing to 1010 Media. Your support helps us continue producing depth, balanced stories about Nigeria's region, histories, and untold dynamics. Share this documentary with someone who believes power only exists in government, and leave a comment, not to argue, but to reflect, because understanding how power truly works is the first step toward building a stronger, fairer nation. Thanks for watching.